Move that way, create a path through.
Can you really defend?
You're supposed to be more than 2 metres apart. You're supposed to be more than 2 metres apart. Move out the way.
Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's top aide, was this morning telling photographers to follow the government's coronavirus rules. But did he break them?
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
This was the Prime Minister on the 23rd of March announcing the lockdown. Just a few days later, when Mr Cummings found out that his wife had coronavirus symptoms, he rushed to be with her and his young child. According to Downing Street, they then drove 260 miles to stay near family in Durham, and soon after that, he fell ill as well. His wife later discussed details of their ordeal in the press, but failed to mention that they had relocated during it. That was instead revealed by The Guardian and The Mirror, with both newspapers also reporting that Durham police had contacted his family about a potential breach of the lockdown rules. In a statement, Number 10 said that at no stage had the police spoken to Mr Cummings or his family about the matter, and that Mr Cummings believes he behaved reasonably and legally. However, a spokesman for Durham Constabulary said that on March the 31st, officers were made aware of reports that an individual had travelled from London to Durham, and that officers did make contact with the owners of that address. At the Daily Downing Street press conference, they were adamant no rules had been broken.
The advice is you self-isolate at home, your family self-isolate with you, and that's very clear. There's always a safeguarding clause in all of the advice, whether it is this or for clinically extremely vulnerable. The interpretation of that advice is probably for others.
In the guidance says, if you're living with children, keep following this advice to the best of your ability. However, we are aware that not all these measures will be possible, depending, therefore, on circumstances. I don't know exactly the answer to when the PM knew, but I know the PM knew that he was unwell and that he was locked down. Of course, the PM was also unwell during the same period in reference. I can tell you the PM provides Mr Cummings with his full support.
So for now, it seems Mr Cummings will hang on to his job.
At least all adults can be infected. We have much
Others haven't. Professor Neil Ferguson was forced to quit as a government advisor after it emerged a lover had visited him during lockdown.
To help save lives, stay at home.
Before that, Scotland's Chief Medical Officer, Catherine Calderwood, stood down after twice visiting her second home. But should Mr Cummings step down? Outside of Westminster, opinions are mixed.
Some people would say that, but I don't know how valuable he is to the government, and they need every bit of help they can get at the moment. So.
Well, it's just contradicting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like one rule for them, one rule for us. Yep.
And he should be setting an example. You practice as you preach, as they say, and I feel that he was wrong in doing so.
I do disagree, because I generally feel that it's a bit OTT. Right now, the restrictions and lockdown is a little bit over the top.
A tough 24 hours for the Prime Minister's most high-profile advisor. But for now, Dominic Cummings is still at the heart of Number 10.
Well, in a moment, we'll speak to Sir Ed Davey, who's acting leader of the Liberal Democrats and previously Energy Secretary in the Conservative coalition government. But first, we're joined by the Conservative MP, Sir Charles Walker, who's vice chairman of the 1922 Committee of Backbench Conservatives. Sir Charles Walker, I've looked at the government guidance, it's here. It's very clear that you self-isolate if you've got symptoms and that you shouldn't be visiting family members who don't live in your home. Did Dominic Cummings break those rules? Should he quit, therefore?
I don't know whether Dominic Cummings broke the rules or not. All I know is that he wanted someone to look after his children in case him and his wife fell ill, and that seems perfectly reasonable. I mean, if you're going to be ill and your wife's going to be ill, someone needs to take care of your children. But look, I'm not part of the lynch mob. I don't think that Neil Ferguson needed to lose his job, nor do I think that Catherine Calderwood needed to lose her job in Scotland. I think people try their best, but we don't know what circumstances throw at them. And we've got this sort of terrible thing going on where we denounce and now inform on neighbours. And I think that has been one of the really quite upsetting things of the last 8 weeks, how quickly some of us have fallen into that pattern. And it's not a good look at all, whether you're on the left or the right or whatever. It's just rather unpleasant.
But when you think about the fact that, millions up and down the country have made appalling sacrifices, and I'm thinking, for example, of the family of the 13-year-old Ismail who died and was buried on his own by strangers because his family didn't want to break the rules and attend his funeral. When you think of those sacrifices, what message does it send that people in power apparently aren't able to make sacrifices of a similar nature?
Because I think lots of people have made sacrifices, but sometimes circumstances become extremely difficult. Look, I'm not here to defend anyone. I'm here to say that it is very difficult for everyone to be perfect all of the time, and there will be extreme circumstances where people do things that they feel they have to do for the safety or welfare of their family. So I just think that we've got to try and be a little more understanding, whether it's Dominic Cummings or anyone else. I just think this has been very difficult on a huge number of people, and not everyone's going to get it right all of the time.
So a forgivable human error, really?
I don't know if it was an error. I'm not saying it was an error. He needed someone, I understand, to look after his children in case him and his wife fell ill. I think that's what most parents would do when thinking about the welfare of their children. I think we really are we love hounding people. Now, this has been we've seen so many wonderful things happen over the past 8 to 10 weeks in human nature, and so many fantastic things. But then we still have this mob attitude now where we love a good pile-on, and one seems to come along every couple of weeks. It's not a doctor or a professor, it's now an advisor. And I think there was a minister a few weeks ago who was taking medicine to his parents. As I said, it's not a left or a right thing. I just think it's a very unattractive development. It's not very British. Well, maybe it is British now, which would be quite sad if that was the case.
I know you've said that Neil Ferguson, the scientist, and Scotland's chief medical officer shouldn't have quit. But do you think that there's a sense that Dominic Cummings is too valuable to the Prime Minister to be sacrificed?
I don't think he should be sacrificed. I don't think we should go around throwing people onto the bonfire. Look, this is a very, very serious time. We need the best brains on it. I was sorry that Neil Ferguson went and Dr. Calderwood went, but look, if this is what the modern world is all about, just discarding people willy-nilly when only half the story is available, then that's what we're going to have to live with. But I think it's a pretty sad reflection on the country if that is the case. A little bit of human understanding wouldn't go amiss in many of these cases, and I think there's quite a lot of that compassion out there. Actually, it just doesn't get much of an airing on the media and in the print media.
Do you think that people should now be taking lockdown with a bit of a pinch of salt, a bit more common sense? So, it's half-term coming up. Should people be able to go on a camping trip and not have the full wrath of the law brought down on their head?
Well, I think it is time we started lifting the lockdown. I've made no secret of that. If we want to have first world public services, we've got to have a first world economy. And right now we're heading fast towards a second world economy with a massive depression just over the horizon. So, yeah, I think we should trust people. I think people are sensible. They can make the right decisions and the sensible decisions. Not everyone, but the vast majority of people will get it right. And I think that should be encouraged.
And you've urged human understanding and compassion for Dominic Cummings. Would you make similar arguments for, a family whose kids are going crazy and they want to take them for a camping trip overnight?
Absolutely, I would. Absolutely, I would. It's not just Dominic Cummings. I've mentioned 2 other people in the public eye who've had the wrath of the press heaped upon them. Absolutely, I would. I think this is putting a huge amount of hardship on tens of millions of people. And in my view, it's gone on for long enough. We've got to start returning to normal. It's not a lot of fun, I imagine, if you're at the 20th story of a tower block and you haven't seen a green bit of grass for the last 8 or 9 weeks.
Nevertheless, isn't there a danger here that, lockdown is starting to unravel, and people's lives are still being lost in their hundreds every day?
There is always a danger. Life is about risk. 6,000 people a year die in their home. If you were worried about it, you wouldn't get up in the morning. 1,750 people die on our roads, but we still commute to work. 150 people a year die at work, but we still go to work. Life is about managing risk, and we've got to understand that. You cannot have a risk-free existence.
So, Charles Walker, thanks very much for joining us. Well, let's now turn to the acting Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey. Sir Ed, What do you make of that from Charles Walker there, that, we should be a bit more understanding of Dominic Cummings?
Well, I'm understanding of the millions of fellow citizens who've made huge sacrifices, who've had to change their daily lives, who obeyed the Prime Minister's instruction to stay at home. And in obeying that, they've not attended family gatherings, weddings, even funerals. They've made a huge sacrifice. But it appears that the Prime Minister doesn't care if his closest advisor just disobeys him.
Well, has he broken the rules, and therefore should he be sacked?
Looks pretty simple to me. I've been listening to what Downing Street have been saying today. I've been seeing if there was going to be an explanation that was credible. There hasn't been one. It looks like he's broken the rules, and if he has, it's simple. He should go. He should resign, and if he doesn't resign, the Prime Minister should terminate his contract. Well,
Downing Street did say that it was essential that he attended to his childcare. Therefore, there were extenuating circumstances here.
Well, we've all got responsibilities to our loved ones, of course, and my heart goes not just out to Mr. Cummings, but to the many, many people who've had very difficult choices to make in obeying the instruction of the government to stay at home. But I'm afraid it beggars the belief that Mr. and Mrs. Cummings couldn't have asked a friend in London, someone else. They've got plenty of means at their disposal to come and help them, or to leave food outside the door or whatever it was required, and not break the rules by travelling 250 miles when they were supposed to be, actually, according to the rules again, self-isolating at home. This is a very serious matter. The death toll in our country due to coronavirus is creeping very fast towards 40,000 people. And I was quite staggered to listen to Charles Walker,
Charles Walker,
I beg your pardon, trying to push this aside as it, there was a lynch mob. No, I'm afraid when millions of people have had to make these sacrifices, it's right that everybody, particularly the closest advisor of the Prime Minister, has had to obey the rules. And if he hasn't, he just has to go. I don't see what's complicated about it. It's clearly very, very obvious I think, to all your viewers.
Do you think that there's a danger now that people see what's happened from one of the Prime Minister's closest advisors and now think, well, they can take a much more relaxed approach to lockdown? Is lockdown beginning to unravel?
Well, if Dominic Cummings doesn't leave his post very, very soon, there's a real danger of that. And when Charles Walker is so blasé about the lockdown and the government's own rules, his government's own rules, then that worries me too. I've already heard one senior police officer say that this breach is so serious that if it doesn't go unpunished, then it will be difficult for the police to ensure that the rules of the lockdown that still exist are implemented.
Have you broken any lockdown rules? Have you or your family broken any lockdown rules?
No. I have
been tempted?
No, I have I have two children, and one of them is very disabled. And I've been worried about him because I think he could be vulnerable. I don't know, he could be very vulnerable. So we've been particularly careful. And I'm sure many, many other people have been very careful. And that's why I presume that the Prime Minister told us to stay at home, to save lives, and not to travel over 250 miles to another part of the country.
And just very briefly, what would you have done if you and your partner had both fallen ill?
I would rung friends. I would ask, could they put the shopping at the in the front of the door? There's very many obvious things that they could do. I mean, obviously, with a disabled child, I have a particular concern about this. So I do think the explanation we've had, while I, of course, one sympathises with people who've got children to look after, I absolutely sympathise with that. But I don't think driving 250 miles to the side of the country was the right answer. In fact, it was completely the wrong answer. And I don't think Dominic Cummings should be in post now.